In talking about being graceful as dads, that automatically brings up the topic of lawlessness. Does having grace mean that you're permissive, lawless in your home? I want to have Dr. Scott Keith discuss this a little more.
When I say the father is supposed to be the voice of forgiveness in the home, I think that we somehow, in our minds, we conjure up that means that the father supports a lawless home, or a home where the children are allowed to do whatever they want, whenever they want. This is not permissiveness. This is not a father walking into his home with blindfolds on and just sort of allowing whatever to happen. What a father knows, probably more than anyone else, are the sins of his children. Right? We know what they have, every mess that they've gotten themselves into. We know about it. We probably saw it coming even. Maybe we let it happen. Maybe we stopped it. It's a balance in this sense that our children need boundaries, or they need fences. The law, I would say, but those fences need to be big fences. There needs to be a lot of room to roam in there. But that the primary calling of a father is not to enforce the boundaries of the fence. The primary calling of the father is to be one who enacts the voice of the law. That is an acknowledgement that you've jumped over the fence and now you're outside the acceptable boundaries. But that he's not the voice of the bigger law that brings to punish, but that on giving that voice of the law, you're outside the fence. Now his role is to forgive, and his role is to make right in absolution, to make right in graciousness, to be that fairy tale story, right? That true myth that there is something out there that's too good to be true, and people have told me that thing is God, and maybe I've seen something like that in my life here, and maybe I can relate to it in the way I've been treated by my father. We tend to rely too much on the law. We tend to think that a little more law will fix things. They live in a world of rules. We think that they don't, but they really do. I mean, if they go to school or they're homeschooled or whatever, their life is dictated to them day in and day out. They know the law. They know what they have to do, and they know when they've done wrong. Everybody tells them that, right? The first word that they typically learn is no. Why is that? That's because it's the word they hear most often. No, don't touch that. That'll hurt you. No, don't do this. The father is called to a particular role in the home, though, and it's to be the other voice, the more obscure voice, the one that we don't pay as much attention to, but when we hear it, it shocks us and it brings us back to life. And it's that, I love you, I know you love me, and I forgive you. So yeah, I'd say more gospel. Law is important, but there's a whole lot of law in the lives of children. And too many books out there, I think, say, if you want your kids to grow up and to be perfect, all you need to do is apply a little more law. I say in mine that I'm not giving you a how-to manual here for how to raise perfect kids, because I don't believe there is such a thing. There are no perfect kids. There are no perfect people. We're all sinners. We all need Christ's salvation. We all need Christ's forgiveness. But dads have a calling, and that calling is to point their children to that forgiveness that's been received on account of Christ. You're not bound to either lawlessness or lawfulness, right? You're not bound to the sin of the younger son or the sin of the older son. The calling is to be the gracious father. If you think about how he deals with the older son at the end, he's not bound to his son's obstinance either. He calls him out on it. Now, he forgives him, and he reminds the son that he is forgiven, but he calls him out on it. He says, son, you should come in and celebrate. Don't you know that everything I have is yours? You've always been with me. But he doesn't remind him of more law. He reminds him of the gospel. This brother of yours, my son, was lost, and now he's found. He's dead, now he's alive. It's good that we should celebrate. In other words, the forgiveness offered by the father in the tale is good, even though it's contrary to our everyday logic. Our society will tell us that the father is good for two things. He's either good to be sort of the bigger bicep, or he's a bumbling idiot. I'm saying there's another way. Masculinity does not mean your biceps are bigger. It means that you're strong enough to be gracious, kind, forgiving, sensitive when needed, strong when needed, and that graciousness and that kindness comes out in the way you treat your family and your children and those who God calls into your life and in the workplace even, and in your neighborhood and in your communities, but that it's not by a show of machismo. it's a show, and more law applied. It's by being strong enough to forgive and to set free, and trust that the forgiveness that you've shown is reciprocated, because that's what grace does. Grace naturally produces what's desired. And it's not what the law does. It's not what more application of rules do. We don't have rules so that children will behave. We have rules to punish them when they don't. And I think people should think on that a little bit. I think sometimes we believe that the rules actually make them behave. Probably not. I think they're there to be used as a mirror when they don't. Now, that means they can be instructional, but it's not what motivates them.
I liked how Scott talked about how rules are not motivational. They are instructional. That as dads, our calling is not to enforce the fence, so to speak, but to call them back after they've stepped over the boundary. We do need boundaries and fences, but they need to be big. Let there be room for some roaming.